Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to do something a little different. I want you to imagine we're strolling together through the grand, echoey halls of a museum dedicated to ancient Mesopotamia. I'll be your curator for this exhibit, and we're zeroing in on one of the absolute most famous figures in world literature, Humbaba. Now, if you're familiar with the Epic of Gilgamesh, you probably know him as the terrifying giant of the cedar forest, right? He's the monster whose severed head became the ultimate heroic trophy. But what if everything we've been taught about him is just completely wrong? What if this so-called monster was actually doing exactly what the gods asked of him? Today, we're going to dig into the hard archaeological and textual evidence to completely unmask this fascinating ancient figure.
Okay, let's dive into our exhibit map for today. We'll be looking at monster or divine guardian, masks that warded off evil, the sound of door masks, comparing ancient guardians, the evolution of a villain, and finally, the modern myth. Let's get right into it. All right, step right this way into Gallery 1. Monster or divine guardian. To really understand Humbaba, we first have to understand the space he was actually assigned to protect. Notice how the geography itself literally shifts in the ancient literature. In the earliest Sumerian tales, right around 2150 BCE, Humbaba's cedar forest was located out east in the Zagros Mountains. But jump forward to 1200 BCE in the standard Babylonian version, and the forest has entirely moved west to Lebanon. So why the move? Well, over 1,000 years, Mesopotamian empires were systematically deforesting the Zagros Mountains to build their massive temples and palaces. They quite literally ran out of trees. So the epic's authors just shifted the mythological forest west, matching where the real-world timber expeditions were heading. Humbaba's home was basically a moving target of resource extraction. And, this brings us to the core conflict. Our heroes, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, they just see a monster standing between them and eternal glory. But the ancient reality, it's way more complex. Humbaba was personally appointed by Enlil, the chief god of the Mesopotamian pantheon. He was a dutiful divine guardian entrusted with protecting divine property. Gilgamesh wasn't out there slaying some evil demon. He was trespassing and murdering a divine security guard. The texts themselves present this immense moral ambiguity. Moving right along, let's step into Gallery 2, masks that warded off evil. We're going to leave the epic poetry behind for a second and look at the physical artifacts. So the absolutely crucial point here revolves around this word, apotropaic, meaning having the power to avert evil influences or bad luck. Honestly, if you remember just one word from this whole explainer, make it this one. Ancient Mesopotamians lived in a world teeming with demons, ghosts, and supernatural threats. To fight them off, they used apotropaic magic. They'd create images of terrifying things to scare away even more terrifying things. And Humbaba's grimacing face, that was one of their absolute most powerful weapons. If you look right here in these display cases, you'll see terracotta masks dating back nearly 4,000 years. Notice they don't show Humbaba's body, only his severed head, and the specific physical features are highly codified. He's got this deeply wrinkled face, a really terrifying grimace, wide bulging eyes, and a bulbous nose. What's wild is that omen texts from the Old Babylonian period specifically say his face resembles the coils of sheep intestines. That's actually a direct reference to hepatoscopy, the ancient practice where priests read the future in the entrails of sacrificed animals. So this grimacing face wasn't meant to frighten humans at all. Its apotropaic function was to stare outward and aggressively ward off evil spirits.
Follow me right into Gallery 3, the sound of door masks. Okay, so we know what he looked like, but let's talk about where he actually came from.
Let me pose a question to you. Where did Humbaba actually get his name? His oldest attested name is Huwawa, and linguists have a major problem with this word because it has zero known linguistic roots in Sumerian, Akkadian, or any known Semitic language. It's essentially linguistic gibberish. So where in the world did it come from? This is where it gets incredibly cool. The eminent Assyriologist Franz Wigerman proposed what's known as the onomatopoeia theory. Just imagine a wooden apotropaic mask of that terrifying wrinkled face hanging on a heavy temple door. As the wind blows or the door violently swings, the wood rattles against the frame. Huwawa, huwawa. Wigerman suggests the name is quite literally the sound the mask made. The mythological character in the epic was actually created after the fact. It was an origin story invented to explain to people exactly why they hung these rattling, grinning masks on their doors to begin with. Let's step into Gallery 4, comparing ancient mythological guardians. Because, as you'll see, Humbaba certainly didn't exist in a vacuum.
Across the ancient world, visual representations of protective, terrifying figures became a totally standard practice. We have Humbaba in Mesopotamia, Medusa in Greece, the deity Bes in Egypt, and later on, Pazuzu back in Mesopotamia. Notice the massive recurring theme here, the disembodied head being used as a protective ward.
And the striking comparison between Humbaba and the Greek Gorgon Medusa is just impossible to ignore. I mean, the parallels are staggering. Both are monstrous guardians. Both are beheaded by a hero, Gilgamesh and Perseus. Both heroes carry the severed head away in a sack or a container as a trophy, and both severed heads mysteriously retain their power after death, acting as apotropaic symbols with that intense frontal gaze. Actually, a lot of scholars believe that through ancient trade routes, the visual imagery of Gilgamesh holding Humbaba's severed head directly influenced how early Greeks depicted Perseus and Medusa.
But keep in mind, there are definitely different flavors of protection. Let's contrast Humbaba with the Egyptian god Bes for a moment. Both feature broad faces and wide bulging eyes meant to look directly at the viewer. But their whole vibe is entirely different. Humbaba is morally ambiguous. He offers protection that is born out of pure fear and intimidation. Bes, on the other hand, despite looking pretty odd, is strictly benevolent. He was a beloved protector of the household, especially for mothers and children. It really highlights how different ancient cultures approach their protective magic.
We should also be careful not to lump all Mesopotamian demons together. Humbaba is often compared to Pazuzu, who you might know as the grimacing demon from the movie The Exorcist. But scholars note that while both definitely have apotropaic functions, their specific iconography is different. Pazuzu is a wind demon, he's never slain by heroes, and his visual details are distinct from Humbaba's signature S-shaped facial wrinkles.
Even with those differences, Humbaba's specific imagery was incredibly potent. As the Epic of Gilgamesh spread, so did those apotropaic motifs. We actually see Humbaba integrated directly into the mythologies of the neighboring Hittite and Hurrian cultures over in Anatolia. His image was a highly effective, exportable symbol of protection.
We're moving into Gallery 5 now, Evolution of a Villain. We've established Humbaba was an appointed guardian and a protective household symbol. So, how in the world did he become the ultimate bad guy?
Let's trace this villainization across time, because it's a classic PR smear campaign. In the early Sumerian texts around 2150 BCE, he's pretty much just an antagonist in an adventure story. By 1800 BCE, in the Old Babylonian period, his terrifying divine attributes are emphasized. He is firmly Enlil's guardian. But look right here, at 1200 BCE, the standard Babylonian version. Suddenly, Humbaba is explicitly labeled an evil thing that the sun god Shamash hates. Why the sudden change? Well, as Mesopotamian empires expanded and their need for timber skyrocketed, they needed moral justification for their heroes, conquering the forest. They retroactively framed this dutiful guardian as an evil monster, just to justify Gilgamesh's actions.
And that brings us to our final stop, Gallery 6, the modern myth. Because Humbaba's story didn't stop in antiquity. In the last few decades, we've completely flipped the narrative yet again.
It's really fascinating how we project our own values onto the past, isn't it? In antiquity, the forest wasn't a public park. It was the private property of the gods. And it was conquered so city-states could extract valuable timber. But today, in recent years, Humbaba has been completely reinterpreted as a symbol for environmental guardianship. People see him as an eco-warrior, a martyr protecting an ecological commons from the destructive, unchecked greed of urban civilization.
But the hard scholarly research tells a slightly different story. As one text points out, the narrative encodes Mesopotamian city-states' exploitation of peripheral forest resources. The Epic of Gilgamesh originally celebrated and justified urban expansion and deforestation. The ancient authors weren't writing an environmentalist critique, they were glorifying the acquisition of resources. Humbaba was protecting divine possession, not nature itself. So as we exit the exhibit today, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Do we project our own modern anxieties onto ancient myths? When we look at Humbaba's wrinkled, grimacing face today, we see an environmental protector wronged by greedy humans. But the ancient Mesopotamians, they saw a rattling door mask, a terrifying ward against demons, and a complex guardian of boundaries. Perhaps the true magic of Humbaba isn't just his ability to ward off evil, but his uncanny ability to reflect the fears and values of whoever is looking at him, even 4,000 years later. Thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me. Keep questioning the myths.